Look at this, people, not just in the water, not just on the water, also up in the clouds, this color comes. Sheer beauty, utter beauty. A gift for our eyes, for our mind, for our soul. It's still developing. A very intriguing line today is, he entered beyond the veil. Our hope is anchored beyond the veil. And there's a lot of background there that requires familiarity with the culture of Yom Kippur. Because one day every year, the high priest on that day, Yom Kippur, entered the veil. On the day of expiation for sin. And there's a special connection here in Magdala for that, because on the Magdala stone, I'm tempted to go there, but I think you'd prefer to see the colors. You have to tell me, if you want me to go to the Magdala stone, I'll go there. But on the opposite end from the menorah on the Magdala stone, you can just go to our website, magdala.org. On the opposite end of the menorah, there is an engraving of two wheels and flames of fire, as the archaeologists interpret it. And so this would be the chariot of fire. Okay, sorry about that, people. My fault. Despite a reminder, I forgot to do the Wi-Fi. That was my fault. Forgive me. So I'm not sure if you prefer me to stay here with these beautiful colors or to go to the Magdala stone. I think you're familiar with the Magdala stone already. And the archaeologists interpret the opposite side from the menorah as representing the chariot of fire, which is really representing the presence of God himself as an image from pre-biblical times, because it's the pagan image for worship of the sun. Because the sun is the source of all our life, the source of light, the source of heat, the source of energy that comes through the chlorophyll for our food. All our food comes from the sun. Not the ultimate source, but because itself is created, but that's the source of our food, our energy. And if we think about all the carbon fossil fuels, it all comes from the sun. And if we think about even, I'm sure the winds are affected by the sun for wind power, solar power, the solar panels. And the ancient people understood that, and they want to keep the sun happy. So they worship the sun. But then with the revelation of God through Abraham, the one true God, then the sun is no longer God. But the imagery stays in the Bible. The chariot of fire representing the sun as an image for the presence of God, which is very interesting to see that. And there comes the sun right now, speaking about the sun is sure to appear. And the language also stays in the Bible, because even in Psalm 19 it says God made a tent for the sun, referring to the whole sky. And he runs his course like a warrior from east to west. And so the sun is still considered poetically as in a personalized way. And this image is represented in the temple because on the Magdala stone, the most important part of the temple, the Holy of Holies, and there was a veil before it. And into that space that was veiled behind the curtain, only the high priest could enter, and only once a year. But then the letter to the Hebrews is interpreting the passion of Christ precisely as the act of the high priest entering to make definitive atonement forever, once and for all. So that's what's behind this verse today in the letter to the Hebrews, that he entered beyond the veil. And there our hope is anchored because of the atonement made. And so through our faith then in Christ, the letter to the Hebrews is working on all of these very devout Levites who were attached to temple worship and had received the gift of faith in Christ, and now were entering a crisis of that faith and wanted to leave probably. And the letter to the Hebrews is addressing this crisis. And so we have these very profound and interesting reflections about the meaning of Christ's passion and death from that perspective. This really is also a deep reflection of how the meaning of Christ himself, you know. And we have that in another way today in the gospel reading. Here in the area of the Sea of Galilee, for sure, the disciples are going through some fields on the Shabbat, and they're taking the grains. And then there are those who are policing what others are doing, religious zealots, and they're accusing them of breaking the Shabbat. And here we have another very powerful expression from Jesus himself, that the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. And the Sabbath is one of the greatest institutions of the Jewish people. And to make oneself Lord of the Sabbath is a mighty claim. And so that's where the opposition, obviously, then against Jesus increases. And we see this very early in the public ministry. There was one line yesterday I wanted to comment a little bit more that I forgot or I didn't get to do. He learned obedience through what he suffered. It's a very interesting line, not just for those of us who make a vow of obedience, because obedience is kind of a dimension of existence to accept much of our life. We can wishfully think that we were living in the 18th century or the 19th century or the time of Mozart or in the 23rd century, but we're living this century that we accept that, to accept reality. That's a basic form of obedience. Because there's sometimes a great rebellion. And he learned obedience through suffering. It doesn't mean that Jesus wasn't obedient before. It just means that through suffering, he had to grow deeper in his obedience. His obedience was tested. And he learned the demands of obedience. He learned that was part of becoming man. Maybe that's one of the things we have to learn a lot, to learn obedience. And we have no shortage of sufferings and frustrations, and so they're a great opportunity to learn obedience. And there's great light comes into our lives with obedience. It's very tough for us. We have a culture of freedom, and we are obviously free, but we're free to accept God's will. We're free to accept the plan of the Creator, the plan of the Redeemer, to enter into that profound obedience. And many times suffering brings that to us. Suffering we can't control, doctors can't cure. Suffering of relationships that become very heavy, very difficult. Suffering of situations, way things turned out in life. COVID came, I was up in this room for my 2 weeks of COVID quarantine. And we have to accept these things. Some people suffer because they're not 3 meters tall, others suffers because they're that tall and they can't get in under any door. We have all our wishes and limitations and difficulties and situations. To have that great basic obedience of God and then the obedience to his laws, because it's for our good, for our definitive happiness. People, that's probably enough for today. Sorry about the breaks there and the transmission. God bless you. See you later, alligators.